The Marin Women's Hall of Fame was founded during the last decade to honor local women of achievement and to create a permanent record of their lives. My name is Nancy Nakai, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Margaret Azevedo, the 1994 Marin Women's Hall of Fame honoree for Public Affairs. Welcome, Margaret, and congratulations on your recent honor.
Thank you very much.
We have found that one of the best ways to find out about people is to talk about their lives in chronological order. So if you would like to tell us, having been such a long-time resident of California, were you born here?
Yes, born in Berkeley. Grew up in Oakland.
So you grew up in the East Bay?
Yes.
What was life like for you as a young girl?
Oh, well, life was really pretty dreamy. I was in a very child-oriented household, had two brothers and a sister, and we had a very happy childhood. And, you know, lots of stimulating things to do. We were taken to the mountains. We were encouraged to read. We were encouraged to put on plays. You know, we all benefited from that childhood.
Did you have any dreams about what you would like to be when you grew up?
No, I was really pretty unmotivated. I think I just kind of went with the flow and loved school and did well in school and liked sports and athletics. And no, I didn't have some big dream of something I wanted to do or be, other than the fact that I always thought I'd like to write, and I suppose Louisa May Alcott was my model.
And she wrote Little Women, right?
Well, yes, I devoured all of her books, and but I don't write like that.
So you enjoyed school?
Yes.
And then you were encouraged to go on to college, I understand.
Yes.
And you went to Cal Berkeley.
Well, first I went to Scripps College, women's college in Claremont. I think they let men in now. Small college. It was a great place. And then I transferred to University of California at Berkeley.
Your major field of study at Cal Berkeley was?
Well, I graduated with a major in French literature, which as time went on, I kind of regretted. But when you transfer and you want to graduate with your class and all. So when I just took what I needed for French literature, and then I did a lot of philosophy and a lot of literature. That's what I really loved.
So you went from philosophy and literature into being employed by the federal government. And could you tell us about your work for the federal government? Yes.
Actually, my first job, all my paid jobs have been with government. The first was with the Oakland Recreation Department while I was still in college. Playground director and working on camp staffs and so on. And this was the 30s, you know. And then through those contacts, I went with the WPA recreation program. And there my job was to train recreation workers who were being paid through the WPA, had been on relief. They had some capabilities and talents which we tried to develop, and then they went to work for various cities and around the Bay Area. So that was my first full-time job.
And was that early work in government related to some of the later work you did in terms of working on issues of housing and employment?
Yes, I think very much so. It gave me a real taste for and liking for government. And I was also learning more about it while at the University of California before I graduated there. And interestingly enough, my interest there came through the student YWCA. The student YWCA and the student YMCA were marvelous, vital places in those days. And what those two student Ys did was get us involved in discussion groups about what was going on in the world. And we got interested in labor, migrant labor, civil rights, all this sort of thing, and they brought in marvelous teachers to sit down and talk these over. I think I learned more there than I did at the university.
The work that you did for the government, it's my understanding that you helped to train those individuals who would work with the children of persons working in the defense industry around the Bay Area.
Yeah, well, that came later. The war came, and my husband went overseas, and I was offered a job in what was then the Federal Public Housing Authority, and they were building war housing, temporary war housing units all around the Bay Area. You know, just throwing them in there, thousands and thousands of units. And I worked for a while in the federal office. My field is what they call project services, and that meant that you were in charge of all the community services that people who came from all these other states needed. Community centers, child care centers, medical clinics, and so on. And I was sitting in an office in San Francisco trying to tell these poor housing managers who, you know, it was a very tough job with these workers coming in, how to do it. And I finally decided I had to do it myself. So a job opened up in the Vallejo Housing Authority, and I took that job. I was in charge. There were 10,000 units of temporary war housing thrown into this little town of Vallejo to work at Mare Island.
And it's not unusual that the people that came to the housing were from all over the United States.
Oh, yes. It was a very mixed kind of group. There were a lot of people from Oklahoma and Arkansas, the Dust Bowls, and of course they were called Arkies and Okies. And then there were a lot of black people from Alabama, Louisiana, and they were supposed to all get along together just fine. They did pretty well. They did pretty well. But you see, the big job up there was to find things for the kids to do, because often both parents were working. They were poor when they came there. And here was a chance, you know, to make a decent living, and these kids were thrown their own. And the kids weren't being well supervised, and they were causing a lot of damage in the buildings. One morning I came in, and there was a personnel director who wasn't a very brave person. He was scared to death of the Housing Authority Board, which I was not. And he told me this terrible story that some kids had turned loose in the community building, and they had taken billiard cues. There were billiard tables in there. They'd taken billiard cues and thrown them up at the ceiling, which was just wallboard, with such force that they stuck. They'd done other things. And at that time, I needed a new person. I needed a new person to hire, and I had offered him the only salary they'd let me offer that he wouldn't take. So I went in, this personnel man said, "The board wants to talk to you." So I went into the board, and first I told them why the kids were doing this. That they were left too much on their own, that they were in a strange community where they weren't accepted, and they were just expressing a lot of frustration and anger. And pretty soon I had, and the amount, the actual physical damage they had done hadn't been that much. It was just the idea. And pretty soon some of these guys were talking about all the naughty things they'd done when they were boys, and then I knew, you know, I was home free. And then I told them, what we need here is good, trained leadership. And I said, I have a man on tap who's had a lot of experience. I think he'd be great with these kids, but he won't come for the salary I've offered him. So they let me, they raised the salary.
Yeah.
And we got him, and he was simply great.
Oh, so after the war, And you moved to Marin County then? When did you come to Marin?
Well, after the war, I was still in Vallejo, and my husband had to stay over. After the war ended in Europe, he didn't get home till it ended in Japan. And then we had a job in the East, a job involving adult education, his field. So we went east, lived in Tiburon for 2 years. Then we came back, and he got his doctorate in education, and immediately took a job with the San Francisco Unified School District. Later went with the community college, but he knew by that time that his field was adult education. And so he headed up one of their, what they call community centers, where people were trained in vocation and a whole lot of other things.
And so you came over to Marin at that point?
So we ended up in Marin. We looked around various places, and we liked Marin, and we just lucked out on finding a house we could buy on the GI Bill. Boy. And I've stayed there ever since.
And you raised a family there?
Yes.
You have a boy and a girl?
A boy and a girl, right.
Now, I understand while raising these two children, you became involved in Marin politics rather early, including chairing Vera Schultz's re-election campaign, Vera Schultz being the very first woman ever elected to the Marin County Board of Supervisors.
Right. Yes, and I think only the second woman supervisor elected in the state. Yes, so...
Could you tell us what running her campaign was like in those
well, she
early...
had been in office 4 years, and she had done... She was a great achiever, and she had high ideals for the county, and she knew government. She'd worked with the League of Women Voters in Mill Valley. She'd been on the city council there, and she really had studied government, and she saw a lot of things that Marin needed. She went to work on them. So at the end of 4 years, she was appreciated. So looking back now on that campaign, it was kind of a breeze. Not that we didn't work hard at it, because we didn't know, but she didn't have any really tough opponents. They were all men, and they, you know, they just kind of faded away. That was 56, and she had another 4 years where, you know, she was responsible for that Frank Lloyd Wright Civic Center. There was no personnel department. She got that in. There was no county administrator. Marin County was really in the dark ages.
And it was her involvement at the county that got you involved in local government.
Then she appointed me to the, when she went in 56, there was a vacancy on the County Planning Commission, and she appointed me to that. And that's how I got into planning and land use and the environment and all that stuff. I really had not done that before. My causes have been social causes. When you were a young college student in the 30s, those were your causes. But I found it possible to combine them. I think I still do.
You were involved with the Planning Commission at a time when Marin was undergoing rapid growth in terms of housing tracts and demands on the land for open space and for parks versus people saying, no, we need housing. And this is when it was probably at its most stressful level because the demands were so high after the war. How did you handle all of the conflicting demands on the Planning Commission for land?
Well, I'm not sure we handled them that well, because at that time the zoning laws were pretty old-fashioned. The zoning laws, there was nothing like the controls and powers that counties and cities have today. And so it was much more permissive. My early recollection is that where you had the big public issues would be whether a neighborhood wanted an apartment house near them or not. The apartment houses were not popular, and there were all these myths about renters, that they wouldn't care anything about the community, and they wouldn't tend the plants and all kinds of things. So those fights were at a pretty low level. the interest in getting more open space was growing, of course, because people, what they were seeing was that the first subdivisions went in the level land. You look at Terra Linda, you look at Bel Air, and they went in the valleys. But then the valleys got used up, and they started up the hillsides. But people had gotten used to seeing those hillsides, sometimes with cows, the green, and they didn't want to see the houses march up those hills. And so that's when I began, and our planning people began thinking in terms of planning that would cover the whole county. Because up till then, the county just planned for the unincorporated areas, the cities planned for themselves.
So there was no cohesive way of looking at development in the county?
There was no scope to it. And so we got... our first planning director retired, and we went after, we knew what we wanted, some of us on the planning commission. And we got this very creative, enterprising director, Paul Zucker. And he had a good staff, and they conceived this idea of a county-wide plan. And we said we weren't really quite up to that. You know, we said, how can we do that? We have no jurisdiction over the cities. And they do their own, and some of it, what they were doing wasn't very good. And Paul would say, well, we'll form a council. We'll form a city planning council, and you work together on it. And the county will take the lead, and we'll inspire the cities. Well, finally, we got that together. It was the first time anything like that had happened in Marin, and I think probably in the state. And this county planning council had a representative, each city from the county, and we worked and we worked and we worked. And there, someplace, you know, in those hallways or little offices of the planning office, they came up with this corridor concept.
Is this also where you help to preserve the hillsides so that there's a nice green forested ridge line between each town?
Ridge and Upland Greenbelt was the name we gave that. And the Ridge and Upland Greenbelts went across west to east, because that's how Marin is. You know, we have these valleys that go out, Ross Valley and Mill Valley and etc. And then you have these ridges in between. They were often wooded and they were pretty. And that was part of it. That was more in the urban part of the county around the freeway. But the big thing was the corridors, which divided the county into three parts, so to speak. The coastal recreation and the inner rural, which is mainly agriculture, and the city-centered or urban corridor in the east. And the amazing thing is that we adopted that plan in '72. It may be dated '73, but we were working on it. '72, those corridors have held. I don't think there's anything like that in the state. I look around me in the Bay Area, and some of the other counties ought to have done that themselves long ago, because that kept the agricultural area.
And you are one of the founders of the Point Reyes National Seashore, which is considered the jewel of the county.
Yes, that was quite a feat.
Yes,
I take a lot of satisfaction.
I understand that took many years. Would you like to tell us about how you started Point Reyes?
It's how these things happen, you know, and if you're a person who really likes public affairs, who likes to take leadership, as I apparently do, you know that it's a step-by-step process. And it started with just three of us who were trying to drum up support for our then Congressman Clem Miller, who had put a bill in for Point Reyes. Clem didn't need convincing. He understood how important it was. And his aide out here had said, you know, Clem needs letters. Clem needs evidence of public support. Because at that time, this was still the '60s, there was opposition in Marin.
People wanting to build housing out
Well, ranchers didn't want it, either because they thought they wouldn't be paid enough for their land, or they wanted to keep ranching. They didn't want it. Speculators who had already bought land out there, of course, didn't want it. And it was a funny situation. So we quickly formed something we called the Point Reyes National Seashore Foundation. We thought up the name and the concept, and then we went to see that marvelous Carolyn Livermore, one of the great ladies of Marin, who, you know, got planning going in Marin, saved many. She and there were several other ladies saved those little state parks out on Tamales Bay. And we went to Carolyn and asked her if she would be honorary chairman, and she said, of course I'll be honorary chairman. And then we started firing off letters and wires, you know, phoned all our friends and said, send a letter, send a wire.
Is this send it to Washington?
To Clem Miller to show him, and there probably were some committee chairmen. And it began to build up, And then we did legitimatize it as soon as we could.
And so it became a federal park in what year? When was it?
Boy.
When was the process all over? Do you remember?
No, I've lost that date, escapes me. It became a park, but the money ran out. And the boundaries have been expanded since then, but the basic park was there, and an understanding was reached with the ranchers that those who were within the park boundaries and still wanted to ranch would have a long-term lease, and some of those are still going on. Others just wanted to sell, sold to the National Park Service. And so there had to be, when was this, 80s? There had to be a second push to get enough money to buy the rest of the land. Peter Bear, just before he became state senator, headed that up. I worked on that committee too.
You were appointed by Governor Brown a few years ago to be on the California Coastal Commission. Conservancy.
Yeah, right.
So you are working to preserve the entire California coast.
We have already. The Conservancy, you see, is an agency that is not a regulatory agency. The commission is regulatory, and we were created when the permanent coastal law came in, mainly because those working under the law realized, okay, so you can tell somebody you can't build a house on this beach, or you can't fill a marsh, but there was no way to restore the marsh or to get access and so on. So we were created to do all those things. And one of our missions from the legislature is coastal agriculture. And we have given quite a few $1 million, granted and sometimes loaned, to the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. Mainly because there are quite a few of these now throughout the state, but they have done such a superb job from the beginning that we gave them this money because we knew they'd put it to work, and they have.
Is it as a member of the Conservancy that you helped preserve Richardson Bay, or is that?
No, that was before.
Before.
Oh yeah, that was before. After Point Reyes, but it was before the Proposition 20 that created the first Coastal Act. And Utah Construction, there was horror abroad on the Tiburon Peninsula because Utah Construction Company was going to come in, fill Richardson Bay.
You mean backfill the whole bay?
Yes, well, or at least the part going out from the Tiburon Peninsula shore there, and put a big subdivision on it.
On landfill?
On landfill.
Oh, wow.
And at first, the people living right close to it were right near the shore there were very upset, but others farther back were not, who didn't look on the bay, weren't very upset till one of these Utah construction people had these meetings to bring us all around, and some smart person said, "Where are you going to get the fill to do this landfilling of the bay, and some dumb Utah construction company person said, "Oh, off the hills here."
So they were going to bulldoze down the Marin
that
Hills.
did it, see. That did it. And so we had a big drive, and again, Mrs. Livermore was our savior, because she got Audubon Society, National Audubon Society, interested, and she also got, here was Mrs. Livermore, who was rich, but she was just, to be with her, she was just as comfortable as an old shoe. She never put on airs. She couldn't run a meeting for sour apples, but, you know, it didn't matter. The meeting got run because she was so great, and we all loved her so much. And she got a lot of her wealthy friends to make private contributions. I was in charge of the drive on the whole Tiburon Peninsula to raise money, and we did it.
Tell us what advice you would like to give to the people that are watching this, especially young women, regarding becoming involved on the issues that you've become involved with over the years. What advice would you give to us?
Well, I guess my first piece of advice would be follow your bents. And you'll know this just in school. I ran for president of the 6th grade at Emerson Grammar School in Berkeley. I don't think I did much, but you know you're somebody who likes to take leadership, and don't back up off of it. Don't, you like to be in the limelight, follow it. And then I think the next piece of advice would be to whatever you're getting into by way of community activity or advocacy, know your subject. Go and look up the facts. Talk to people. That's what I did. And of course, one way is through the League of Women Voters. Off and on, I've been active in League of Women Voters. I was in the East. I was in Oakland. I am here. An organization like that gives you a tremendous opportunity to know what you're talking about. So if you go to the Golden Gate Bridge Board or wherever it is, you're going to get respect. So study the subject and then speak your mind, girls.